The LG Procast is intended for informational and entertainment purposes only. The views or opinions expressed by the podcast hosts and guests do not necessarily reflect the official position of LG. For the latest and most accurate information about LG products, please consult relevant product manuals and related documentation.
Welcome to the LG Procast. I'm Terry Frisenden. Along with me today is Philip Craigbaum.
Terry, great to be with you again today. We've got another really cool episode planned. Today, we're going to talk about 5, maybe 6 of the most common, we'll call them myths, or maybe misconceptions or issues that surround this technology. As you and I go out in the whole country and we talk to contractors all over the place, you know, we get feedback. And so we hear these things, these myths or misunderstandings. And so we just want to hit a few of them. Let's get started. So the first one that I've got is, I hear everywhere that I should be able to put one of these in every single room in my house. Terry, is that a good idea, a bad idea? Sometimes. So open that up.
Yeah, and you know that I'm around the country in front of builders and contractors all the time, and you're right, Philip. That's just the way that this technology was introduced into the United States. And from a single zone application, okay, that kind of made sense. But when you start trying to do multi-zone applications, you can't put a unit in every room. And I can go for hours and hours about it, but it boils down to this. The smallest capacity indoor unit from a manufacturer on the multi-zone is probably 7,000. Maybe some people have a 5,000 BTU. And if I look at the building loads and the manual J load calculations for how much air conditioning and heating this 12 by 12 bedroom needs that you want to put a unit in, you know, that average load is 2,000 BTUs. So then you're grossly oversizing these systems when we do that. And of course, grossly oversizing systems has always been a bad idea in the HVAC business, whether it's inverter driven technology or constant speed stuff that guys are familiar with.
Yeah. You know, you and I have both done hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands and thousands of manual J loads, but you know, I'm finding that that's not necessarily as common practice as it should be. But yeah, so what about putting one in every room? Okay, so if my room is too small, and granted, there are some houses where the loads are adequate to put one in every room, and we absolutely can. But in those homes that are, especially newer homes that are being built more and more efficient, you know, you think about these spray foam homes that are going, you know, 1,000, 1,200, 1,400 square foot a ton. There's absolutely no way that you can put a unit in each one of those 3 or 4 bedrooms, because those loads are going to be in the hundreds. So in those cases where we can't put a unit in every room, what do we do?
Man, we do what we've been doing in the U.S. since the dawn of central heating and air conditioning. We run ductwork. That's why we make a myriad of ducted products to go with this technology, because walls stop BTUs from going one space to another. And we build houses with walls in the United States. So we need a ducted product line in the U.S. to adapt this technology, to take advantage of this inverter-driven efficiency and inverter-driven capacity and grid taxation and all the stuff that we spoke about in previous episodes. You got to have ducted product to do it. And so that's changed. And I got to tell you, 27, 28 years ago, from the first manufacturer that I started working with this technology, I was taught, or told, taught's a terrible word. I was told you can't really oversize an inverter, you could only overprice it, right? And man, did that bite in the tail feathers. So yeah, it can't be done, Philip. You have to size them correctly, right? Once you size them correctly, install them correctly, guess what they do?
They work.
They work. They run correctly,
Yeah.
right?
And we've got 2 different ducted models available. So we have a traditional sized air handler, looks, feels, acts just like the air handler that we've been using for the last 40, 50 years. And then we've got, I call them pancake units. It's, you know, 10 inches or 12 inches, depending on the size, and a couple of feet wide, and it's real thin, and they can fit in some really, really cool spaces.
Pancake's a great term because that's what the U.S. manufacturers have called those things forever as well, right? They fit horizontal, they mount horizontal. They go up tight against ceiling spaces. They fit in the soffits. They do things like that, but they're for a purpose. And the
Yep.
purpose is to allow you to run ductwork, okay?
Yep.
To cool. The thing that we do differently, of course, is we make those things in small capacities, 9,000, 12,000, 18,000, right? We make those things in small capacities so that I can zone homes with indoor units and not some other methods that's not been all that successful, right? But zone these homes with indoor units and take the little 9,000 BTU and do that 2,000 bedroom with ductwork, a 2,000 bedroom with ductwork, a 1,000 bedroom with, and zone accordingly. That's how you build systems
Yep.
with this inverter driven technology to make them work in the US.
Right. We zone it with the refrigerant. We send the refrigerant to the zone that it needs to do the work within. Smaller units, much smaller capacities, much less ductwork, quite a bit less ductwork.
Yep.
Even if we're going to use ducted units throughout the whole home and it's a large home, we're going to require less ductwork, less installation.
Smaller,
Yep. And by the
smaller
way, to
ductwork.
mention one little point, you said that those pancake units mount horizontally, and they always have. But the new version that LG just released can also go vertical, which opens up a lot more applications where you can stick it in
Yeah,
some more creative
I
places.
I am so excited about that new mid static horizontal slash vertical air handler because you're right. It could be mounted in stud walls and framed out so that the ductwork's going up a stud wall versus having to drop the ceilings in a basement or having to
Yep.
drop the ceilings in a an apartment or home, right? So yeah, that's a great application that's coming and looming on the horizon for builders, contractors.
Yeah. So the second one that I wanted to hit on, and golly, you just about stole my thunder, is what about, and I was taught the exact same thing, you can't oversize a mini split. Those
Man.
exact words were said to me.
Yeah, I just if you look at this data and you look at single zone versus multi zone. And listen, when we're talking single zone, we're talking about one outdoor unit and one indoor unit. Okay, the way mini splits were introduced to the United States, right? But when we start talking multi zone and whole home heating and cooling, that's a single outdoor unit connected to multiple indoor units, just like it sounds, right? But when you look at the capacity data and the performance data, single zone has an operating range. We'll use numbers, all right, but let's say this 9,000 BTU single zone system has an operational range and cooling of 1,000 BTUs to 11,000 BTUs or 10,000 BTUs, whatever the number is, right? And it runs anywhere in that spectrum. That's what the Hertz changing compressor does. Matches the load. That's the words that the inverter folks like to use, right? So it's matching the load, right? But when I start piling on more indoor units connected to a single outdoor unit, the capacity is changing as I add more evaporator space, more coil space, and then that minimum capacity is going up. And then now I'm no longer able to spin low enough, go slow enough to meet that small bedroom load that's being called for because all the others are satisfied. But what
Okay.
happens, right? What happens is I get a system that's oversized, right, in general, and then one component of it's grossly oversized, right? That bedroom with that unit is way too large, right? And you get a system that doesn't run long enough. And in the cooling mode, that means it doesn't run long enough to remove humidity and change the latent load, which means you got a cold, clammy room. If it's in the heating mode, obviously it's not running because it's satisfied quickly. It's just sitting on the wall radiating heat because hot refrigerant is still running through it. So it's radiating heat and overheating that space. And we see it every day in the contractor world.
Yep. So you absolutely can oversize and short cycle an inverter system.
Absolutely.
Well, Terry,
Absolutely.
what if we're using that single zone that you just spoke about that has the ability to go to 1,000 BTUs? And I did the manual J, and this bedroom needs 1,400 BTUs. Should I put that in there?
Well, you can, but it would be the same as you taking your big truck you bought and idling it its whole life and never drove it out of first gear. You just idled everywhere you went. And obviously that's not good for your truck and it's not good for your heating and cooling system either to just always work at idle. They have to run in their hertz range, all right? And so properly sizing it, manual J, properly sizing it so that it runs in its hertz range. That's what you want it to do, because on cloudy days the load is this, and then on sunny days the load is this. That's what you want, a system that can do that. That's where the
Right, because
benefit comes in.
that 1400 BTU load is what, 3 o'clock in the afternoon in the middle of July when there's no clouds out.
Right.
That's the peak. Statistically, 99%. That's the peak that you're going to see. And so, if our minimum that the unit can do is very close to the maximum that that room is ever going to experience, like you said, that unit is still grossly oversized and it's not going to work well. But people put them in all the time, and that's what's given this technology a little bit of a black eye is misapplication. People think they're magic, and they are great, and they are more forgiving than a traditional system, I would say. But it's not a magic bullet. You still got to
Yeah,
do it right.
you know, we kind of here's where I'm headed. Okay, if I if I'm on any type of social media, right, I'm bombarded with every ductless manufacturer in the world, right? And some of them are extremely cheap compared to, an LG or a premier brand. And, and the contractors are frustrated because they don't know the difference. The homeowner is frustrated because they don't know the difference. They just know that, hey, I can buy this, brand X, and it's, whatever the number is. And I got a contractor who has trucks and license and insurance and running a business in my town, and he wants two, three, four times more than I can buy this thing for online, right? We got to get past that, because there's no support, there's no parts, there's none of that stuff on these brands that you're buying online. So you got to get past that, and then you got to delve into what is my contractor providing for me that makes the price differential acceptable, right? And so you deal. That's business.
So Terry, that's the next thing that I wanted to go into is the misconception or the thought that, and I think maybe window units have kind of given us this misconception that it lasts for a couple of years, then you throw it away. You're not going to be able to get parts for it. What happens with LG? And there's other, like you said, other reputable, solid brands. We can speak from LG's vantage point. What happens if you do need a part? Can you get them?
Yeah, so that's. I think when I'm asked, and I know you're asked the same questions, so are all the sales folks on our team. What makes you different? Why should I buy you versus another brand, right? Well, I think when you look at the footprint that we have here in the United States, and you look at what we do from an appliance perspective and a home electronics perspective, all those parts for all that brand, right? All appliances, washers, dryers, whatever, all TVs, everything that we make, parts come out of Huntsville, Alabama, right? And when you call Huntsville, Alabama, you get a part. It comes next day air as a standard shipping policy for HVAC products if ordered by 2 p.m. Central Time, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, Philip, but that's what makes us different. We're managing a parts facility, and it's very large, in Huntsville, Alabama, that stocks all the parts for all the stuff that we sell in the United States.
Yeah, and part of why we get to do that is because LG's such a vertically integrated company that, like you said, we have such an infrastructure already built out in the U.S. that I saw a list not too long ago, and the number of parts that they stock just for our HVAC and the number of SKUs that they have was extremely impressive. And I'll tell you, just from a personal standpoint, every manufacturer a couple of years ago experienced shortage of equipment, and we were no different. We had our shortages, although I would say we were much better case than many of our other competitors out there. But I didn't hear that gripe from parts. They did a fantastic job all throughout COVID of managing their parts, and I kudos to those guys. They did a great job.
And it's different when I can pick up the phone and call and speak to somebody in Huntsville, Alabama, that 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 I can communicate with freely and openly, right? And I can understand what they're saying to me. And so, yeah, again, I think that's a huge deal. And listen, if you're selling and buying a mini split, again, two of my favorite words is said from another podcast. If you're buying a mini split for a porch and you lose heating and cooling on your porch, no big deal. But you and I and LG Electronics, we're promoting whole home heating and cooling, inverter driven technology to take over and do what we want it to do because it has the capabilities to do it. Not only do it, but exceed at it. Parts got to be a part of the process because you're right. It's mechanical. Stuff can and will break. It's how you fix it and how fast you respond that makes you different. And that's where we have a huge competitive advantage in the United States. Now you talk about the leaking flare. So
Flares leak, Terry.
flares,
Every
flares,
flare I put in leaks, man.
every flare leaks, right?
I
So
hear that. I hear that all the
it,
time.
look, it's probably the single biggest service related issue. Power would be second, but certainly a leaking flare just creates this downward spiral of service, right? And if you look at our little podcast characters, you'll see the words right between Philip's character and mine, and it says, "I fix mini splits." Well, I tell as I educate across the country, I have a generic white billboard that says, "I fix mini splits, license number and phone number." And I jokingly tell contractors week, day, whatever, whenever I'm doing it, day to day, week to week, whatever, that if I was 30, I would move to your town and I would put that billboard up on the biggest road you have, and I'd go to work and I'd be the wealthiest HVAC contractor in the town, and I'd do nothing but fix leaking flares for the lack of a better word, right? The art is gone, right? Hopefully we'll do an episode upcoming about skills and trade quality and craftsmanship and
Mm,
get into that a little bit. But the skill to make a refrigerant flare is a lost art. And because it's a lost art, it's not practiced. And because it's not practiced, they leak. And that spiral starts and then it just goes downhill from there. We'll get into that in another episode, but there are certainly tools that improve that process. There are new products available that eliminate a flare altogether, right?
yeah.
There are mechanical fittings that eliminate a flare altogether. So there are certainly improvements and processes and devices that are going to make the flare either a thing of the past or make it foolproof. I use the word
Yeah.
foolproof, but at least improve its reliability from an
So
installation
maybe
standpoint.
maybe if you don't mind, we can just hit a couple of the high points of flaring. So number one, if you buy a line set with a flare already on it, that flare cannot and should not be used. It's put on there to hold the nut. That's the only reason that it's there. Cut it off. Take that nut and toss it in the garbage as well. Take the nut that LG gives you. Have a good quality flaring tool. Slow down. Take a little bit of time to make sure that your flare is that your copper's set in there properly. But what's that tool that we see guys just either they don't own or they don't want to drag it out of the truck because they know what tight feels like, right?
Yeah, that'd be the torque wrench, right? So,
Yeah, that's important, huh?
yeah, it is because all manufacturers we publish a torque setting for the flare nuts, and I got to tell you, as a guy that grew up in the industry, you already know my history. I own two crescent wrenches, and my torque setting for every torque nut was the same, regardless of if it was quarter inch or three-quarter inch. It was pull two crescent wrenches as hard as I could pull them, and then look for something to help me pull it even tighter. Be
Yeah.
that a foot on the wall and a breaker bar or something else, right? And it's just we were over tight, we were over torquing those flares and splitting them underneath and creating that
Hmm.
refrigerant leak. And then again, I will say it over and over. You know, that leaking refrigerant flare has created the biggest black eye in this technology. It has prohibited the adoption of this technology because guys are just, I call it flare scared, right?
Yep.
They're afraid of it. And
They
so
tried it a couple times, not knowing what they were doing, and it failed every time out of a lack of education, out of a lack of. I think most guys really want to do it right. I mean, when you come
they
down
do.
to it, they want to do it right. They just don't understand that over tightening that flare is a problem. And like you said, when I go around, I have a digital torque wrench that I have, and the quarter inch flare nut has a torque rating of 13 to 18 foot pounds, and I can grab that torque wrench and I can just twist it in my hands, and I can get it over 20 pounds just holding it in my bare hands. I've over tightened that flare nut just like that. It is so easy to over tighten those small nuts.
You and I have a lot of fun when we do these classes around the country with guys.
Yeah.
So we'll set that torque wrench up for 13 foot-pounds and put it on the table and tell the guy to come click it, and just see just how little pressure that is. And they all look at you with the deer in the headlight look, like, oh, I know what
Yeah.
I've been doing, right? So
And I've
yeah,
had that conversation, and I've challenged some guys. They said, "Dude, I know what tight feels like," and with all due respect to anybody that's been in this industry long enough, that it's just not true. There's different torque settings
that
depending
size.
on the size of the line set. So it's 13 to 18 for the small one, and I can't think off the top of my head, but it's 70 plus for
For a
a
three
large
quarter.
3/4 inch.
Yeah.
And to know what all those steps in between, just that's not possible to
Yeah,
know
and
what tight feels
I
like.
know the slide in the presentation that you use around the country has a statement at the bottom of it, and the statement at the bottom of that torque chart setting is this isn't a recommendation, right? I
Yep.
mean, nobody in that room, we ask them all the time, if anybody in this room works on a car motor, boat motor, tractor motor, whatever, you torque every bolt that you touch because you already know, or somebody already knows what happens if you don't. All right. And that's the same messaging that has to start happening with this technology. Like, this is why it has to be done, because if you don't, it will fail. Right.
Yeah.
And I fix mini splits, license number, phone number, because now I can go to work. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's pretty easy to find them. It's really easy to fix them when you know what you're doing, you have the proper tools, and you care. It's not a hard fix, but it's definitely one of those issues that is plaguing our industry.
Yeah, like I said, there's some devices out there now, a lithium powered flaring tool, a push to connect fitting ready to 850 psi. Just a lot of stuff. And listen, our country's really good at taking technology and making improvements to it, right? Or making installation improvements to it. And that's what you're starting to see happen now. Okay, the technology is continuing to grow, and now this entrepreneurial spirit of US citizens is getting involved, and they're starting to make these products better, or make them that make the installation better or whatever. So that's what you're seeing now as we move forward in the uh, installation, adaptation, or adoption of this technology in our country.
Does LG have a position? I get this question a lot. Does LG have a official position on all of the third party connectors, whether it be the push fit type connector or the press tool? What is LG's position on that?
We have several white papers that address that specifically, and we do not. We don't recommend a brand, but we don't say don't use a brand either, right? What we say is any failure caused by improper use of even copper, improper use of copper, right? Warranty could be null and void, right? So um, the good news is the manufacturers are making those fittings. They're top-notch countries or companies, right? They're top-notch. They're making sure that the tolerances are correct and the quality process is correct. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, that's just you're seeing, like I said, you're seeing involvement of products because the technology continues to grow in the country.
I see flare and I see brazing as both being ancient technology when within just a couple of years. I see that
I
being
agree.
outdated.
I
Yeah,
agree.
it's
We talked
it's going
about
away.
refrigerants. Yeah, we talked about refrigerants a little bit, and with this A2L classification, and so yeah, you're gonna see a move away. It has to. It's better. I tell folks all the time, man. I live across, and I see NASA, oh now SpaceX, I guess. I see those guys shoot a rocket like weekly. All right, and I guarantee you, there's no braze joints on that machine. Okay, those are all connections that are either flared together or put together with some kind of connection device because it's shaking and vibrating and going to space. Right, so it can be done. It can be done at 450 psi. I promise you.
Oh,
Right.
absolutely,
So,
absolutely. All right, I got one last thing that I want to hit with you. Um, Inverter heat pumps or heat pumps don't work in cold climates.
we've talked about this in a couple of episodes now, and
Yeah.
if folks that if they've listened to any of the episodes that we have so far to date, we continue to harp on this and beat on this because this is an acceptance thing for HVAC contractors. Man, there's this just big block wall up that they just won't work, right? And in previous episodes we talked about the compressor and the Hertz changing and the electronic expansion valves, and you know what? Your grandma, your mom probably told you, you just gotta try it, all right? You weren't gonna eat broccoli, all right, but you just gotta try it one time, right? You gotta try it, all right? 1982, the first ones were made, okay? Inverter driven products, heat pumps. 1982, right? It has gotten so much better since 1982 till today's cold climate product line, right? I don't know how to tell contractors. If you look at the data, you look at AHRI data, and you see a segment of the business tripling the growth rate or doubling the growth rate of another segment of business, you got to think that some people are making the decisions to put this stuff in their homes. Okay. And the good news about social media and the good news about all the information is available, outside online and stuff, is people are making their own decisions, right?
Yeah.
They're not no longer just, oh, I'll just 100% trust what the HVAC guys got to say or the electricians got to say. They're all going to do their own research now, right? We all travel, you know, and when we travel, we get to see opportunities to see different things. And people travel to different countries and go, wow, I stayed at the blah, 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 and it had this type of heating and cooling system in it. Man, was it nice, right? And then they
Right.
come home and want to find out about it. And the contractor's got this big block up that says, I don't do those, right? So,
I've heard that so many times. Oh, I don't mess with mini splits, and it drives me nuts. It's just this, call it ignorance, whatever you want to call it. I've got a nephew in his 20s, been in the trade for a few years, and first guy he worked for, oh, we don't mess with mini splits at all. And I'm like, buddy, this is the future, and you need to, don't let that mentality hold you back. Maybe he can finish out the last 5 or 8 years of his career without getting into this, but you're young, and this stuff is the only thing that we're going to have going in the future. And thankfully he's been able to get more education and move forward. But to the young techs out there, anybody that's got more than 5 years left in their career, this is where it's going, and we've got to get on board with adopting it. Like you said, just trying it, taste your broccoli. You just got to jump in. But there is education out there, and that's part of what this podcast is. That's part of what my role within LG is to educate the contractors and take away a little bit of that fear factor.
yeah, I'm trying to take away it all. I'm trying to take all the fear away, right? I
All of
mean,
it.
how can my 3 ton, number one size system in America, right? How can my 3 ton heat pump that has no indoor power requirements because the power's being fed from the outdoor unit, has a 3H, 5H refrigerant tube that connects outdoor to indoor, nothing's different, has a 14 gauge wire that connects power indoor to outdoor. How is that any different than what they do every day of their life? The
It's
ductwork's the
not.
same, the equipment's the same to a point, more efficient, hertz changing, capacity changing, but the install is exactly the same, right?
Yeah.
And so it it's not scary, right? They do it every day of their lives anyway. So let's change the shape of the box or the size of the box and the name on the box, and let's get in the business.
Let's do it. Well, Terry, thanks again. It's always fun. I love doing these things with you. I love hanging out with you. We covered 5 myths or misconceptions today of things that surround this technology, right? And so what we did is we tried to just demystify a little bit and help guys realize that this isn't that scary, and that they can do this, and that this is a better technology when it's applied right and when it's installed right. It just works, and it works really, really well. So, again, thanks for hanging out with me. I love doing these shows. We got more episodes coming up, right?
Yeah, we do. You can catch these podcasts at the at LG HVAC site or any of the the platforms that you're using to listen to podcasts. We're out there. We enjoy it. We're looking for suggestions. If you want a subject that you want us to cover, by all means, reach out to us and get a message to us, and we'll make sure to get that covered as well. In the interim, see you on the next one.
See ya.